Hey, it's Mel. I hope you're doing well and welcome back to my channel. If you're new, it's lovely to have you here. In today's video of the life and death of Princess Diana, we're going to be talking about her death and the mysterious details surrounding it. We're going to pick up where we left off. If you haven't seen part 1 or 2, I suggest you go and watch those videos before watching this one, just so everything kind of makes sense. And with that being said, let's get into it. On the night of the 31st of August 1997, Diana, her partner Dodie, along with a bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones and head of security at the Ritz Hotel, Henry Ray Paul, were all leaving the hotel to go to Dodie's apartment. The group were in a black Mercedes S280. Trevor was sat in the passenger seat, Paul was the driver, and Dodie and Diana were sat in the back of the car. As the group left the hotel and drove off, they were followed by paparazzi. 5 minutes into their drive, Paul drove the car into the Pont de la Mar tunnel. He lost control and crashed into the 13th pillar. The crash was loud and the car was wrecked. Diana's bodyguard, Trevor, was the only person to survive, and he was also the only person wearing a seatbelt. Dodie was thrown out of the car upon impact. Paul and Dodie died instantly. A doctor called Frederick Malley, who was in the tunnel that night, claims that when he got to the car, he saw Diana, who was still alive, calling out for Dodie. As all this is happening, the paparazzi are doing nothing to help. They're just taking pictures. They took pictures of the wreckage and they were only a few centimeters away from Diana's face. According to the doctor, Diana's last words were, quote, "Oh my God, leave me alone," end quote, which is so sad to think about. Because the wreckage was so bad, they had to cut Diana out of the car using a chainsaw. Back then in France, they dealt with emergency situations very differently. I'm not sure what it's like now. Usually back then in France, they would treat on the scene and then transport once the patient was stable enough to make the ride. Diana wasn't taken to the hospital until 1:20 a.m, over an hour after the accident happened. On the way there, Diana suffered cardiac arrest and they stopped the ambulance 2 times to resuscitate her. She finally made it to the hospital at 2 a.m. The accident occurred at 12:23 a.m. Why did it take them so long to get her to the hospital? Like, this is not just some random person. This is Princess Diana. Like, in this entire case, no one has like a sense of urgency, and you're going to see that as we continue. Once Diana was at the hospital, she was rushed into emergency surgery, but she sadly died on the table. She was pronounced dead at 4 a.m. and she was 36 years old. The news of Diana's death affected millions, including her sons Prince Harry and Prince William. Everyone was heartbroken, and at the time of her death, Prince William was 15 and Harry was 12. The accident occurred 15 days before Harry's 13th birthday. As I said before, the only survivor of the crash was Trevor Rees-Jones, Diana's bodyguard, and he suffered serious injuries and he broke every bone in his face. He was in a coma for over 10 days and he also suffered chest and brain trauma. People were hoping that when Trevor woke up from the coma, he would remember something. However, when he did wake up, all he remembered was getting in the car back at the hotel, and then everything just went black. It turns out that the crash was caused by Paul's reckless driving. Paul was driving around 65 miles per hour and he was allegedly very drunk. According to reports, his blood alcohol level was more than 3 times the legal limit. Side note here, I'm filming this part on a different day, hence my appearance, but other than that, let's continue. Now the thing is, Paul lived close to the hotel and he was working that day. However, there was a point during the day where Paul went home for a little bit. Some people think that he went home, had a lot of red wine, and then came back to work later on, completely wasted. But there's security footage of him later on at the hotel working, and he seemed completely fine. And the people that he was with also said that he was completely fine. He did not seem intoxicated or drunk. Something else that is really strange is the tunnel where the accident happened was sprayed with some kind of detergent, hosed down and washed, and then reopened to the public 24 hours later. Because of this, many people started talking about the idea of this being a planned accident. A full inquest into the crash didn't happen for nearly 10 years. At the time, a lot of people were blaming the paparazzi for Diana's death because they pretty much chased her into the tunnel. Now there's a lot of theories as to what actually caused the crash, and we're going to go through them. The first one being that this was a planned accident. On the night of the crash, right before it happened, a white Fiat Uno car was seen in the tunnel and it hit the back of Diana's car and pushed it into the 13th pillar, causing the crash. After the crash occurred, the white Fiat Uno sped away and a couple later came forward and said that they were almost hit by this Fiat. The police never found the Fiat and never positively identified the driver of the car. Now what's interesting here is that white paint was found on the side view mirror and on the bumper of Diana's car. Also, pieces of plastic were found in the wreckage which matched the Fiat. There are a few suspects in this theory as to who was driving the Fiat. At the time of the crash, there was a 22-year-old man called Levan San, and he was a taxi driver and owned a white Fiat Uno. He was also identified by a witness as the driver. According to his dad, Levan woke his brothers up in the middle of the night a few hours after the crash to help paint his Fiat from white to red. Levan also replaced the bumpers on his car. He was interviewed by the French police for 6 hours and then released because of his alibi, and his alibi was that he was at work all day. However, his alibi was wrong. On the day of the crash, it turns out that he had actually left work early. The driver of the white Fiat Uno could have also been photojournalist James Anderson. He had been following Diana for weeks and the week before her death. He owned a white Fiat Uno, and some people think that he was actually an informant for MI6. MI6 is like the FBI, it's one of the UK's intelligence and security agencies. Less than 6 hours after the crash, James boarded a flight from Paris to Corsica, an island in the Mediterranean. Why he flew to this island is unknown. Shortly after the crash, James painted his Fiat and sold it. He was interviewed by the French police and immediately released and cleared. After this, for months, James was allegedly bragging to his friends that he had explosive photos of Diana at the crash. Then in 2000, they found him in a BMW car parked in a forest in the south of France. Someone had set the car on fire and James was badly burned. It took a month for his body to be identified. The firemen who found him said that he had 2 gunshot wounds to the head. However, the autopsy report revealed that there was only 1 bullet hole found in his left temple, and his death was caused by the intense heat of the fire. His death was ruled as a suicide. Going back to the only survivor of the crash, Trevor, as time went on, he started to remember more about that night of the crash. He said there was a motorbike that followed them into the tunnel, and it was next to them at all the red lights. Before the crash, a witness described the same motorbike and said it was driving on the right side of the car, and it cut off Paul, who was driving the car, and caused it to go into the 13th pillar. The motorbike had cut off Paul, so he couldn't exit the tunnel. According to the witness after the crash, the man who was driving the motorbike got off his bike, calmly walked over to the scene and put his hands up in an X as if he was signalling to someone. He then got back on his motorbike and left. Witnesses that night claimed to see 7 motorbikes surrounding the car. Now things get even weirder. On the night of the crash, there was 14 CCTV cameras in the tunnel. However, there is no footage of the crash. And apparently, that's because the cameras were not working. Some of them were switched off or turned around the opposite way. The police claimed that none of the cameras were working that day. However, a person got a speeding ticket from one of those cameras 15 minutes after the crash. On Diana's journey from the hotel to the tunnel, there is no footage at all, which is weird because they passed so many cameras. The next theory is that Henry Ray Paul caused the crash. He was head of security at the Ritz Hotel, and according to reports, he was allegedly very drunk at the time of the crash. Some people believe that he was working at the hotel as an informant for MI6. Some people speculate that he was hired to cause the crash. A few months before his death, someone had made a direct deposit to his bank account for $43,000. Where this money came from, no one knows. His job paid $21,000 per year. After his death, he had $171,000. It's also possible that Paul was used to cause the crash, but he didn't do it himself. On the night of the crash, Paul didn't take the direct route to Dodie's apartment. There was reports that the usual road they used was blocked, so Paul took the tunnel instead. Even though Paul was drunk at the time of the crash, he was also taking prescription drugs, such as Prozac and Tiopride, which is a tranquilizer that is used to treat alcohol withdrawal, which could cause a delayed reaction and visual problems. But Paul's family insist that he was not a drinker. Paul spent some time at the hotel that night with two of Dodi's bodyguards, and they said that he had 2 drinks and he seemed fine. Also, in order to reach the blood alcohol level that Paul was at, he would have had to have 8 or 9 drinks on an empty stomach. In the hotel footage, he looks fine. Paul's blood also showed a high level of carbon monoxide. Some people think that his blood test was switched with someone else's. Trevor, who was in the passenger seat at the time of the crash, said that Paul seemed fine, he was not drunk, and if Paul was drunk, he would not have allowed Diana to get in the car. It's possible that the Mercedes car was also tampered with. It turns out that it was a stolen vehicle, and it was missing a microchip that controlled important things like navigation, acceleration, braking, and steering. The Mercedes company actually offered to look at the car for free to see what might have gone wrong, but the French police would not let them. It was soon discovered that the ambulance used to get Diana to the hospital that day was only driving 25 to 30 miles per hour. They also didn't take Diana to the nearest hospital, and they stopped the ambulance 2 times to resuscitate her. After Diana died, instead of getting her to the morgue, they just put her in this empty room. The hospital staff put an air conditioning unit and dry ice in there to keep her body cool, but it was not enough. The staff embalmed her body before an autopsy or any type of testing could be done. Their reasoning for doing this very fast is because they felt pressured by the royal family. Now here's where things take a turn. Richard Tomlinson, who was a former MI6 officer, came forward and revealed that the agency had been monitoring Diana, and they also had a secret informant working in the hotel, and Richard believed this informant was Paul. In 1992, Richard said he was shown plans for an identical accident. In 1999, it was revealed that Diana had been under surveillance by the National Security Agency. Diana said that living with the royals was a secret hell. Diana believed that the royal family resented her, and Charles just wanted her out the way. Once Charles and Diana's divorce was settled, Diana hired her own security team to look after her family, but before doing this she was offered royal security, to which she said no. Diana was afraid that the royals would continue to spy on her. According to friends of Diana, shortly before her death, she was constantly worried about being bugged. She would check everywhere for wiretapping and also check her cars to make sure that basic functions worked. After Diana died, her close friend and butler, Paul Burrell, came forward with a letter that Diana had wrote 10 months after she separated from Charles. In this letter, Diana said she was afraid for her life. I'm not going to read out the whole thing, just the parts that stick out to me. In the letter, Diana spoke about Charles planning to kill her. Quote, "This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous. My husband is planning an accident in my car, brake failure and serious head injury in order to make the path clear for Charles to marry." End quote. Diana was always afraid that one of her cars would malfunction, therefore she would always wear her seatbelt. However, what's odd is that at the time of the crash, she was not wearing a seatbelt. The only person who was wearing a seatbelt at the time of the crash was Trevor, and he was the only survivor. Experts have said that if Diana was wearing her seatbelt at the time, she might have survived the crash. Diana's former bodyguard, Barry Manecki, who was at one point romantically involved with Diana, died in a mysterious accident. He was on a motorbike as a passenger when he suddenly crashed into a car. Diana believed that something happened to him on purpose. At one point, Diana told her lawyer that she was afraid that someone was after her, and she was also afraid of the royal family. After Diana's death, everyone was heartbroken, everyone was devastated, including Prince William and Prince Harry. Diana was such a loved person. Her funeral took place on the 6th of September 1997. When a royal person dies, the flags are lowered to half-mast. This is a sign of distress, respect, and mourning. But the royal family decided that because Diana was not an official royal anymore, they could not lower the flags to half-mast or even acknowledge her death. This, of course, caused public outrage. But the royal family did eventually respond 1 week later by raising the flags at half-mast for Diana. I mean, you're a little bit late there, aren't you? It took the Queen 5 days to publicly address Diana's death. The Queen spoke kindly and highly of Diana in her speech. When Prince Charles first got word about Diana's death and the crash, he fell apart. His first question was, quote, "They're all going to blame me, aren't they?" End quote. He then said, quote, "We're going to see a reaction we've never seen before, and it could destroy everything. It could destroy the monarchy," end quote. In the weeks leading up to Diana's death, she kept talking about this big surprise, and this started a lot of rumours about Diana being pregnant with Dodi's baby, but we will never know. Like I mentioned before, the hospital staff embalmed her body before any type of testing could be done. In February 1998, Dodi's dad said that he believed the crash was planned by the Queen's husband, Prince Philip, with the help of MI6, because Diana was pregnant with Dodi's baby. He claims that one day Diana told him she was pregnant. This is all coming from Dodi's dad. It's looking a bit suspicious. The royal family at this point were very stressed. The finger has been pointed at the Queen as her being the one who called the shots, but me personally, I don't think she's involved in Diana's death at all. And the reason I'm saying this is because at Diana's funeral, the Queen bowed down at her coffin as a sign of respect, and this was huge because the Queen did not bow down to anyone. However, some people believe that the Queen just did this as an act in a desperate attempt to save the royal family from collapse. Now time for final thoughts. I think that Diana was killed by MI6 with the help of the French police. I don't know if there was like a deal or bargain done. The French police in this entire case look so damn suspicious. I mean, they fucked up from the very beginning. Right after the accident occurred, the tunnel was hosed down, cleaned with some type of detergent, and just washed and reopened to the public within 24 hours. The cameras were either not working or they were turned around or switched off, whatever. And what stands out to me the most is that the Mercedes company came forward and was like, "Hey, let us look at the car for free. We want to try and figure out what's wrong with it." And the police had a problem with that. They were like, "No, that's not going to happen. Not a good idea. We don't need to look at the car." Do you get what I mean? It's a bit suspicious. It seems to me like everyone involved in this case has no sense of urgency whatsoever. Right after the accident occurred and Diana was brought to the hospital in the ambulance, they stopped the damn ambulance 2 times to resuscitate her, and then they didn't even take her to the nearest hospital. They went to the furthest one that was away. If someone's dying in a fucking ambulance, you would automatically assume that, hey, they're gonna get you to the nearest hospital, but no, they delayed it basically, and the whole thing's just really suspicious. So yeah, I believe that MI6 and the French police were equally responsible for the death of Princess Diana. Princess Diana was a strong and kind person. She was a symbol of hope and an inspiration to others. She loved the people, and she will never be forgotten, but always missed. That was the life and death of Princess Diana. I hope you've enjoyed this series. Give this video a like and feel free to leave a comment below. As always, thanks for watching. Take care.